Hello, Zeteskians. Today we resume the touring World of Warcraft series with the Legion expansion, or at least the islands associated with that expansion. Throughout the later expansions, many of the earlier continents are reused, so it isn't a one-to-one anymore. I touched on this during the Eastern Kingdoms video. The mount for this video is the Spirit of Echero, which is an archaeology quest mount obtainable in this region. The Dalaran that we visited so many times has some slight changes, including this demonic-looking forge. However, any functionality that was once tied to it has long since been removed from the game. There is another island floating nearby with Conjurer Magos doing a little fishing. He has his own reputation track, similar to Nat Pagel from earlier expansions. It is unclear if the small islands surrounding Dalaran in the sky here are part of Dalaran, or were already here in the Broken Isles when Dalaran floated on by. The Broken Isles are near the Maelstrom, which we know is the ancient Elvish civilization where Sargeras was almost summoned to Azeroth during the War of the Ancients 10,000 years ago. But a time-traveling orc named Broxigar held him off until Illidan, Tyrande, and Malfurion could close the portal. The resulting explosion shifted the continents apart, flooded Nazjatar, and destroyed much of Suramar and the surrounding lands, which are now known as the Broken Isles. As such, we expect to see many Naga here, as well as other allies from the War of the Ancients, such as the High Mountain Tauren, which fought alongside the elves against the demons. If you've ever heard of Huln High Mountain, he was the leader at the time, and the modern-day High Mountain tribe is named after him. This area is also heavily infested with demons from the Burning Legion, not because any of them survived the Ancient War, but because they have chosen this as their latest invasion point. After their first attempt failed, they tricked Aegwynn into passing on a demonic soul to Medivh in utero, which could then be controlled in his sleep to construct a portal in the Black Morass, later known as the Blasted Lands because of how the portal sucked the life energy out of the swamp to power itself and turn the area into scrubland and rocky desert. Meanwhile, the Burning Legion worked through Gul'dan and Ner'zhul on the Orcish homeworld, renamed as Draenor by the self-declared Draenei, or Exiled Ones, after they fled their homeworld of Argus with the help of the Naaru to escape the Burning Legion, corrupting their species, the Eridar. The corrupted ones are now called Man'ari, or just demons, which is a catch-all term for all the species of the Burning Legion. The Orcish invasion of Azeroth was supposed to soften up the world for invasion by the Burning Legion, but it failed so spectacularly that Draenor ended up exploding, losing its oceans and much of its landmass. The failure of Ner'zhul was punished by, well, this is where it gets complicated. The original version is he was punished by getting his soul bound to a set of armor and a sword that were crafted by the Nathrezim, also known as Dreadlords, and having that whole thing encased in ice and placed in Northrend on Azeroth with some of the Dreadlords acting as his jailers. Then he slowly gained control over the necromantic powers to command armies of the undead, wage the War of the Spider against the Nerubians, reach out to Kel'Thuzad in the Eastern Kingdoms, start the Cult of the Damned, then invade Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor for the events of Warcraft 3. However, later World of Warcraft expansions slightly retconned this. So now the sword and helm, and presumably the rest of the armor set, were crafted by the Jailer in the Shadowlands, and he tricked the Burning Legion into imbuing them with Ner'zhul's soul, so that the line between life and death would become blurry and allow him to corrupt living beings and escape from the Maw. which was an afterlife prison he was placed in after he failed in his duties as arbiter, which is the job title of the robot that judges souls of the dead and places them in the appropriate afterlife. But only the souls that actually make it to the afterlife. Any souls that get absorbed by Naru, such as hundreds of generations of orcs on Draenor, never get a chance to be judged. So the Burning Legion doesn't have necromancy, but the jailer's weapons and armor do, which is how Ner'zhul obtained necromancy and partially explains how he was able to rebel against the Legion. As a side note, during the first two wars between orcs and humans, the orcs did use something they called Death Knights, which were mounted orcish troops that had magic powers, but were not undead. Ner'zhul apparently liked the name so much that when he was corrupting Arthas through the use of Frostmourne, the sword crafted by the jailer, he decided to name Arthas the first of a new generation of Death Knights. And, of course, he made many more after Arthas. Or perhaps Arthas made more after he fused with the armor to become the Lich King. As I said, it got complicated. Anyways, the Legion invaded during Warcraft 3 and attempted to destroy the Night Elves, which were the same elves they fought during the War of the Ancients, and it ended in somewhat of a stalemate. The Legion's forces sent back to the Twisting Nether, since they use a similar soul magnet like the Naru, but much longer range and much more targeted. But Mount Hyjal was heavily damaged, and the Night Elves had to give up their immortality to win. Immortality, which was granted by the dragon aspects using the tree at Mount Hyjal as a catalyst, effectively funneling Titan magic to the elves. All as a reward for their assistance during the War of the Ancients, which also involved fighting against the Black Dragonflight, which had been corrupted by the old gods and used an anti-demon magic weapon against other dragonflights and elves in a mid-war betrayal. Depending on how you count different demonic interferences, Warcraft 3 was approximately the third major invasion of Azeroth. The fourth was when Garrosh and some time-traveling dragons went to alternate Draenor of the past, met up with alternate Gul'dan, and started the Legion invasion of the Broken Isles, which brought us here. There are a few dragons here and there, but since the War of the Ancients rearranged all the continents, many dragons wander around or do their own thing nowadays. I'll talk more about the dragons in a future video when we cover the Dragon Isles. The Broken Isles have mostly been retaken by the wilds. You can see many elvish ruins abandoned, as well as a few buildings using the newer Night Elf architecture, which uses a lot more wood rather than stone. In the west, near Blackrook Hold, there is a small human settlement, most likely from Kultiras, which was the main naval power of the Alliance during Warcraft 2 and 3. The Etin here are an Azerothian equivalent of the ogres which evolved on Draenor. The northern coast of the islands has an interesting cameo by King Murgle, who, as we all know, is a night elf from Deda, dressed in a costume that we met in Northrend. What is he doing here? What about the Murlocs that he was watching over in Northrend? Maybe he's more of a traveling scientist or documentary filmmaker rather than someone who devotes their entire life to a single tribe in a single location. Or perhaps the Murlocs migrated and he followed them here. Please forgive some of the phasing here. When I reactivated my account after many years, there was an option to get a bunch of level appropriate gear and bags, and it said it would clean up the quest log. But it appears that the cleanup means reset many of the quests that I had already done. So there are a few reputations that I'm exalted with, but their quests think that I haven't met them yet. Or quests that reward a mount that I already have. Up on the mountains, we can see a few Tauren graveyards, and I think they reused the visuals of the corpses from Mulgore because the High Mountain Tauren have different style horns. As we continue on, we can see some of the devastation that the Legion has caused, and we can actually tour the intact city of Suramar. If you are level appropriate, there are some stealth quests to go around the city without being seen and gather information while in disguise. But for this tour, I'll be flying. The barrier that protected the city from the explosion 10,000 years ago is still visible, but isn't super functional anymore, which is one of the reasons the leader of the city actually sided with the Legion, and why we need to kill a bunch of the leadership of the city and instate our puppet leader. Sorry, I meant the appropriate leader, the Lysra, who we also need to save from severe mana addiction. The mana addiction causing elves here to become decrepit, hunched, and lose their minds is interesting. Those types of stories always get to me. If you haven't read Flowers for Algernon, it is a famous book in real life about a scientist and a lab rat. The rat is given superintelligence, but then slowly loses it. There's also plenty of books and movies about dementia and Alzheimer's that cover the same story arc. South of the city is the Ebon Hold, which I didn't know until I saw it here could actually travel away from its home in the Eastern Plaguelands. It functions as the Death Knight class hall in this expansion. I haven't done most of the class hall quests, but I'm aware there are some pets locked behind certain classes. I did the Hunter class hall when I was playing through on my main character, and I think I did the Demon Hunter class hall, or at least part of it. I would go through all the class halls on two conditions: if I could skip or one hit kill all the combat encounters, and skip or fast forward all the traveling. I'm sure there is someone who has uploaded the playthroughs on YouTube. I heard the Death Knight Order Hall quest has you invade the Paladin Order Hall to steal a corpse. I think I heard the Priest Order Hall has something to do with the Naru. On one hand, I want to praise the theme of the storytelling that is locked behind huge investments like factions, class, or species in this game, because it shows how difficult it is to get all sides of the story, and shows how different perspectives can reflect on the same events. On the other hand, I really do want an omniscient perspective so I can know what actually happened behind all the miscommunication, lies, deceit, betrayal, and schemes within schemes. The Vrykul here reinforce what we saw in Northrend, that humans evolved from them, and rather recently at that. Recently, as in after the War of the Ancients. I usually handwave this away, saying that the magic on Azeroth causes extremely fast evolution. How else could we explain the different morphologies of Blood Elves, Night Elves, and Suramar Elves in the span of only 10,000 years, especially considering that many of the Night Elves were literally alive and adults back then? That pretty much wraps up the Broken Isles, but the Legion expansion also introduced Argus. We can actually visit the planet that Archimonde, Kil'jaeden, and Velen were born on. We even resurrect Illidan from his soul gem to get his help fighting the Legion here. We board a Naru spaceship using teleporters, and unfortunately, we're not allowed to fly on Argus, so this leg of the tour is a bit slower than I would prefer. I liked meeting up with the Eridar, who neither fled the planet to become Draenei nor joined the Legion to become Man'ari. They have been surviving and waging guerrilla warfare against the Legion for who knows how long. Longer than the written history of Draenor, for sure. The question has arisen: what is the Twisting Nether? Is Argus in the Twisting Nether? Can the Legion spread the Twisting Nether to new planets? We know when we kill demons, their souls return to the Twisting Nether, and Sargeras has a whole bureaucracy there to determine if their bodies are rebuilt, or if they're tortured for a while, or if they're given different bodies. And we know that the Legion didn't start on Argus. Beyond that, we don't have many answers. The Void is another unknown, which I think the writers plan to address in future expansions. Maybe they already have by the time this comes out. From what I know as of the end of Dragonflight, the Void is a realm of corruption It has been infecting the material plane since almost the beginning of the universe by sending old gods flying through space like fleshy meteors. Once an old god lands on a planet, it becomes something of a homing beacon to attract more old gods. Sargeras, back when he was a Titan, fought against the Void while the other Titans were ordering planets and trying to find new Titan eggs, which are planet sized. And two notable examples are Argus and Azeroth. Sargeras found out that the old gods were reinfecting planets they had already cleansed, and new old gods were spawning faster than they could kill them. So he decided he needed an army. Furthermore, since it took so long to move from one planet to another, he needed an immortal army. And he needed to do something so when he left, the planets would not get reinfected. His solution was to use portals and teleporters to link together all the planets of his army so his entire force could defend any planet that was under siege by the Void. Meanwhile, any planet that refused to join or had no sentient life would be destroyed, so the old gods would not be able to take hold. There's some gaps in my knowledge about the Twisting Nether and how the Legion started using it. I know that Sargeras fought the other Titans who disagreed with him about his extermination policy. I think he killed one, and the rest went into hiding, only to re-emerge once Sargeras stabbed Azeroth himself. They and Illidan now act as his jailers. He may have actually killed them all, and they may have come back afterwards. The story is a bit fuzzy for me. Another mystery still remains regarding the Titans. They awoke and started searching for more of their kind. They had incomplete knowledge of the material plane and nearly zero knowledge of the other planes of existence. Both of the Arbiters and many of the denizens of the Shadowlands are robots. The Titan Keepers are also robots, created by the Titans. The Titans themselves seem to be made of rock and metal, but less robotic than most of their creations. We know that Titans hatch from planet-sized eggs, but we also know that some planets do not have Titans in them. The recent World Soul saga hints that not all World Souls are Titans. So, Titan could be a creed rather than a species. However, we haven't seen a Titan egg being laid. Do they coalesce from space dust like regular planets? If so, how do some get a world soul and others don't? Are they being placed in the material plane by something from the order plane, similar to how old gods are sent from the void? And what about the Shadowlands? Was the Arbiter created by the Titans? Who is building all these robots? Why do these robots sometimes take on disguises to look fleshy, if not mortal? Does that imply that they have fought old gods before, or perhaps allied with them? I guess I can leave that discussion for the Shadowlands video. New videos every Saturday. Please like, comment, and subscribe.